Hi, welcome back to the Workbench. I'm taking a look once again at the ElitePad 1000 G2 from HP. What I'm doing today is actually installing Linux on it to replace the Windows installation that was on there, Windows 10, for storage reasons, and I'm going to see if everything works out okay on here. Spoiler, it apparently worked out okay because I'm editing this video right now on the tablet. Also, I was going to take a look and see if there were any problems with it, go over some of the pitfalls you might run into, and take a quick look to see if using Clonezilla to back up the initial Windows 10 installation over to a server and restore it works okay. So, check that out. If you enjoy the video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe down below. If you have any comments and or there's problems with it or anything I screwed up on, just let me know in the comments down below. Thanks. Let's see how to get Linux on here. And here we have the boot section of the Ubuntu Bootloader in Grub. Also, this is the Linuxium release, but that's just a remix, a script that runs and rebuilds some of the things, including the kernel, with some extra Atom-based modifications so that it'll work better with the Atom processor. And that's what it's running on here. I believe this is the, it's either Cherry Trail or Bay Trail. I think it's Bay Trail on this release for the Atom in here. It's the quad core. It's got 4 gigs of memory. It's pretty useful. Anyway, so let's load up Ubuntu and see what we get on the OS. And my reason for doing this isn't entirely because I prefer Linux over Windows, although I do. In this case, for the hardware itself, there's only 64 gigs of storage on here. Windows, for some of its updates, takes up more than 64 gigs of storage. So overall, it's not a terribly useful installation with Windows 10 on it. Although it can be used, I believe it just blocks the updates on some of them. Somebody over at Microsoft must have realized that they had actually released the operating system on devices with under, in some cases, 32 or 64 gigs of storage space, and their updates don't actually work on that when they try to automatically run, which is great. So they were failing on there when I had Windows up on here, and it wasn't enjoying life. In this case, the Ubuntu release tends to be around 8 gigabytes total storage space with everything included, and that's with a pretty good application loadout as well, not just the base OS as you'd have on Windows. So 8 gigabytes versus 32 gigabytes for just the standard install fresh is a pretty good savings in storage space, and it makes the thing pretty usable. My main questions with Ubuntu would be how it handles screen rotation, the font size, and just the DPI on the screen in general. Also, if sound will work, if video works okay, will GL rendering work? All right, and here we go. Install Ubuntu, and I'll just go through the default install on here. Now, the reason I'm worried about things like GL rendering and sound not working, or Bluetooth, or any of the Wi-Fi, things like that, they tend to use fairly oddball chips in these systems. I'm still not entirely sure why. I can't imagine that the cost can be that different in a tablet versus a standard machine. And the layout on the boards and the size of the chips doesn't seem to really be that big a difference. One of the other things I noticed on here is that if you have Secure Boot turned on, I checked this out, I did have a problem with it. If you have Secure Boot turned on in here, and you go into here to install third-party software, it'll require that you set a password for the next time you reboot so that you can tell Secure Boot it's okay to run the third-party modules in your kernel. Unfortunately, on this default screen layout they have, that blocks off the quit back and continue on the bottom. You can also just tab to the correct entry by hitting tab over to continue. So in that one, the problem was if you made it too short of a password, it wouldn't really notify you that it wasn't working, but there was a little exclamation or something at the tail end. And you'd have to change the password to something good. Then it would let you go to continue. That wasn't readily obvious because you couldn't see the bottom here. So something to be aware of if you have Secure Boot still turned on and you need to set the password for that on this screen. And we're just going with normal install, download updates while installing, install third-party hardware. I've got the networked cable plugged in, so it shouldn't have a problem doing all of that live on the internet. Should be relatively quick, or at least as fast as a 1 gig Ethernet connection with a 50 megabyte backbone handling it goes. And for this, they do have some interesting options in here now. You can do the erase entire disk, advanced features. It'll let you install with LVM with the new Ubuntu installation, which also lets you encrypt it if you'd like, which is probably nice for a portable. I'm not going to do that on this because I just want it to run as cleanly and as fast as possible. This probably isn't going to leave my desk. Erase disk and use ZFS is also an interesting option. ZFS would let you do volume and kind of a pseudo RAID array, or possibly it is a RAID array in ZFS. It's a collection of disks anyway with some redundancy for ZFS. So you can check that out and use it right from the installer, which is kind of neat, but I'm going to forego those options for now. And we're just going with the standard erase disk, standard partitioning scheme, install now. I think Ubuntu actually does a partitioning scheme where the boot sector, the boot partition, is just part of the main partition now, which would be nice. Traditionally, they had done a small boot partition, which ended up being a problem on a lot of the installations I had because it would just go and write out continuously new kernels to it without ever erasing them by default, and it would just overflow the volume they had set up for the boot sector pretty quickly, which was irritating as anything. And here we go. Installation going on. Starting up. We'll just leave it defaulted. And give it a generic username. And done. So, now I've got to set it up. Also, what I intend to use this for is my benchtop machine when I'm explaining things or doing things. The processing power on this should be just fine for running systems, doing screenshots, showing you a video of the screen, that sort of thing. And the screen resolution is adjustable once the install is done. You can change the DPI. I'll show you that. It should be anyway. And we'll have to see if it looks okay on this desktop. My concern is that it might not work well with this specific piece of hardware, or the speed might be a problem, or flicker, or anything along those lines. There's issues with doing that with just different types of hardware. I'll be back in a little bit to show you the Linuxium desktop. We'll see if any of those concerns bear out and if there's any fixes for any of the problems that I run into. And to complete my tests, I'm restoring the Windows partitions on here just to make sure that it actually works correctly after a restore from Clonezilla. I wasn't sure. Sometimes this has trouble. So we'll see in a minute whether this actually restores okay from the image as I created earlier, and see if that works all right. There we go. Took a little longer than expected, but as you can see, the Windows OS restored okay from Clonezilla. So, at least in one case, backing it up with Clonezilla entirely and then restoring it worked just fine on here. So, I've got a backup image of this that I can use now of this specific desktop and key, so I can restore it if I need to over the Linux image, if the Linux image doesn't work correctly, or if I have some other need to restore this thing back to its OEM state with Windows on it. So, that is a good potential option for you if you don't want to permanently change it over to Linux and you just want to temporarily use it, or otherwise check out different distributions on it and maybe change it back. Or if you've got a different use case like I do, where occasionally you might need to restore it to Windows for some application or event or something where you need the tablet for some other purpose. So let's get this going and see how Linux installs on here. What I'm probably going to use is the Linuxium release. It's got some changes for the Atom processor in particular, so I'll try that on here first. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but we'll see how it goes with that first. And two things to note on this that you might want to do prior to getting that going. One of the things is that it might be a UEFI 32-bit BIOS. I was unsure on whether this one was or not. I can probably check that once I have Linux up on it to see what it's booting on. Also, the BIOS can get changed so that the secure boot is off if that's desirable for you. That's F10 on boot up, just hold it down, or it's volume down button if you're using just the touch screen. Also, with Clonezilla, you want to load up the GPT UEFI version. I used Rufus in Windows to write it out. I actually just used this Windows release to write out that thumb drive for it. So you can do that prior to restarting if you don't have any other computer, or you can bring up a Windows machine and just load up Rufus, write it on there. You can also use Linux for that. What you want is the GPT formatted UEFI version. That seemed to work fine. the legacy version with the MBR bootloader didn't work with Clonezilla, the one I did with Bolina Etcher. So your mileage may vary, but that's how I got it to work on here. Okay, so 20.04 is installed, focal fossa, obviously from the laser beam eyes on that cat, and we're going to restart now. Maybe with the keyboard. Oh no, it's working. Again, this thing's a little laggy, so sometimes you have to actually wait for things to happen with this tablet. What I'm wondering will happen here is how long this is going to take to boot, because 20.04 is actually a good bit faster than some of the previous distributions as far as speed of booting goes. Although on this I'm not expecting too much. A lot of that's probably down to refined startup sequence with the new Upstart, I think it is. Whichever one they went with. Anyway, the new startup sequence on the Ubuntu desktop is a good bit faster. It runs in parallel, so it can use even the slow four-core parallel processor to really speed up booting up the distribution. And there we go. Logged in. First, let's see how the sound went. I'm not hearing any audio on startup, and I believe it does have a startup sound normally. Okay, so that's good. It gives you a little thing to connect to your accounts. I think it might be, oh nope, there's a skip button on the top right. Nope, do not want that. Show first report line. Do not send any information canonical. I prefer it doesn't just send random information out. Location service. No, we don't want that. And done. Okay. So there we go. Actually, that's kind of huge. I'm assuming that's a multiple of the resolution. Let's see what we get on there. Settings. Although maybe it's not under there. Let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, just settings. Okay. Let's go to appearance. There's icon size, background. Nope. Maybe set it something a little less purple. Appearance, position on screen, auto hide dock, notification. Probably going to put a different desktop on here. I'm not a huge fan of the Ubuntu dock left thing. It also tends to be weird trying to explain to other people who don't specifically use Ubuntu. It's a little different from pretty much anything else you could use. Alright, there we go, displays. Let's see what we've got under here. And there's the scaling. Let's turn fractional scaling on, see how it works. So we can go back to 100%, which is just the straight DPI scale. Let's apply that. Keep changes. So now we should be able to see everything on the screen. Unfortunately, even with I think this is a 1080p display, at 200% you still can't make out some of the corners on some of the menus and whatnot. It cuts off. So they're just not set up to allow for that, which is kind of weird. You would think that a double-sized display would still give you the menu entries, but it's all set to be larger than that these days, so it just doesn't work. Let's try 150%, see if that looks okay. There we go. That looks a lot better. That should be a fairly functional option. Let's see, Nightlight. We'll turn the Nightlight option on. That just gives you a warm color instead of the harsh color. So as you can see, it just gives you a kind of orangey hue to the screen. I do like that in the evening. I don't know if it's easier on the eyes or not, but certainly looks nice. We're not concerned with updating the software at the moment. I don't know why I put this on the screen. That wasn't the desktop I chose for the background. Let's see if I can change it again. Maybe it was a set of backgrounds? There, nice forest scene. Perhaps if I close this. Does it work? Oh, there we go. That's better. Oh, the resolution's very nice on this monitor. I have to give it up to HP for that. They make this little 1080p display look pretty nice. I'm guessing the audio just isn't working, but let's see if there's a default sound we can play. If not, we'll have to go on the internet and find something. And no audio. Kind of like I expected. That doesn't work. So this has a Byte C 524, I think it is. Hold on. Let's see what exactly it is, rather than guess at it. Ah, there it is. The Byte CR RT5640 card, which is a weird audio card. So maybe this will work if I just get PAVU control or something to control the pulse audio with installed, and then check to see. 1 second, let me see if that actually will work. So PAVU control. PAVU control, right, is an audio application that will let you mess around with pulse audio and set various settings with it. It still doesn't give you full access to all of the options, which is somewhat irritating in some cases, but it gives you better access than you'd have through the icons in Ubuntu usually. So let's see what that does for us, if it'll give us an option to turn on the audio controller and then try playing that sample again. The headphone output thinks it's getting something. Built-in audio speakers. Let's try speakers. Oh, there we go. Great. So with the Linuxium release, the volume control works okay. The audio with that Byte C audio card actually comes up correctly. So I'd recommend just using the Linuxium release. Let's see a fanfare for a common man. There we go. It spins up all right. So that handles audio. The only other thing I really want to see is if GL works in here, because obviously the audio is now working. The video display works okay on 150% even with the partial resizing. And as long as you set the speaker output to speakers, that works okay. And you can use PAVU control. It's PAVU control. Running that gives you access to it. Then you can just set the output to the speakers instead of the headphones, which it defaulted to for some reason. I don't know if that's because it's on the stand or what. That might be part of the stand enabling that. So that could be the case on that one. So let's check GLX info. And for that, I'm just going to install Mesa utils, and that'll include the GLX info program, which will tell us if we're using GL rendering, and we can also get GLX gears to just do a simple GL rendered display and make sure that it's working. GLX info should show that it's using the Intel GL drivers, the DRI drivers for Intel, but we'll see in a second if that's actually the case. I have absolutely no idea how the video on here is being rendered. I don't recall what this uses exactly, but I think it's using the Intel on board. All right, scroll up a little bit, and what do we have here? OpenGL Mesa, that's good. And up at the top, Intel open source, Mesa DRI, SGI. Yeah, so it's using the Intel. Nice. So it is using the Intel driver. And GLX Gears renders. So yeah, everything just works using the Linuxium release. I did try the stock release and it had trouble with the audio. Everything else appeared to work though, so I don't know. This seems to be pretty functional. I think it'll do everything I needed to do, certainly. It handles GL, it handles audio. There isn't much else to it. Right, there is one more quirk with this. So, although it doesn't appear to be doing it now, when I took it off the stand, you'll notice that it had brightened and dimmed automatically. That is the auto brightness option. And that doesn't quite work right on here for whatever reason. There might be something you can tweak, but I'm not really that interested in it, frankly. So, I'm just going to go into the settings and let's see what we can find on there. Here we go. Under the power settings, there's an automatic brightness. Turning the automatic brightness off should disable that function. Let's check that. There we go. Yeah, now it's not dipping and moving the brightness around. You can set up some features, but that would probably need to be tweaked. I think it uses the camera to determine it, and it's probably just a little aggressive wherever it's being set from the look of it. So that should be fine. And put it back on. And it's charging correctly when it's put on the stand too, which is good. I wasn't sure any of that would work correctly if it needed something enabled to actually do the charging, so that's all set. So yeah, overall I'm happy with it. It's running Linux 20.04 focal fossa just fine. I'll switch to a different desktop, I think, because I'm not terribly fond of that left column, although that might work okay on a tablet display. I'm not sure. I'm not really sold on it as far as using it on a desktop goes. It seems to be, I don't know, for me it's a little weird. But for the touch screen, this actually might work just fine. Yeah, I don't know. I never have any luck using those. So, that's a quick look at installing Linux on the HP ElitePad 1000 G2 tablet. It looks like it works pretty well. Let me see if there's anything else I needed to bring up on here. Nope, that was it. Yeah, so it works well. I'd recommend it. I think this was all of $40 or something because the battery hadn't been working when I initially bought it, so, and plus a stand. So it ended up being a few dollars, but overall it's a very nice display and it works. So if you can get one of these on the cheap, being cleared out of somewhere, it'll make a nice Linux desktop, and it did work in Windows okay, just the space requirements are a little hard on a Windows 10 environment, certainly. Fitting it in a 64 gig storage area is kind of a challenge, whereas the fully loaded out Linux desktop is only taking up 8 gigs, 8 and a little bit of change. So that leaves you 48 gigs to play with as far as storing your applications, storage, what have you. So, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.